From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight, we're going hunting for Atlantis. Here's what's happening. Well, it's happened again. Former President Donald Trump has surrendered on charges that he illegally schemed to overturn the 2020 election in Georgia. A brisk 20-minute booking that yielded a historic first, a mugshot of a U.S. ex-president. He was released on $200,000 bond, headed back to the airport for his return flight home to New Jersey. He's been indicted on 4 separate occasions. Japan has started releasing treated radioactive water from the wrecked Fukushima nuclear power plant in the Pacific Ocean, a polarizing move that prompted China to announce an immediate blanket ban on all aquatic products from Japan. China is highly concerned about the risk of radioactive contamination brought by Japan's food and agricultural products, according to their Customs Bureau, and they're probably right there. A hospital in Indiana where a staff member recently tested positive for tuberculosis has notified about 500 patients that they may have been exposed to that illness. Clark Memorial Health in Jeffersonville says that it sent out hundreds of letters to those possibly affected following the confirmed case. High-fat diets could be driving America's colorectal cancer epidemic in young people, according to a study. Researchers at the Salk Institute and the University of California in San Diego found that high-fat diets change gut bacteria and alter digestive molecules called bile acids in mice. Christian Wild from myheartbook.com on with us here. Another study that is very poignant, Christian.
Very, very definitely so. And we as parents and families may want to take a longer look at this. Yes, George, it just came out. There might be a message here. I don't think McDonald's or Burger King are going to like this report, but it came out today, and as you said, it concerns eating fast food diets and colon rectal cancer among young people. When we, the public, suddenly get an announcement from the medical research community about a new devastating health condition, which they are even calling an epidemic, a dramatic toll among our young people, isn't it time for all of us to take notice? One study, George, predicts 3,750 cases this year, and an article called Onset Colon Cancer predicts an increase to 90% by 2040. Scientists have been watching for a very long time, but until a cause had been identified, which happened today, and a link that proved there are obvious reasons, have remained somewhat silent until today, when they have come out for the first time and claim they have proven without a doubt the epidemic rise in colon cancer among our young people is undeniably, according to all the studies, actually and literally caused by eating high-fat diets. Here is the stated cause of the rise in all of this colon cancer.
Unbelievable. Christian, thank you. Christian's website, myheartbook.com. A NASA scientist has revealed that she's absolutely certain there's been alien life out there. Dr. Michelle Thaler spoke with the U.S. Sun about the alien life in the solar system at the Beyond the Light experience in New York City. Dr. Thaler works as a scientist at NASA's Goddard Space Center and has decades of experience. And she says, I definitely think we'll find life on another planet. How about that? Here's Kevin Randall, retired lieutenant colonel, with his weekly UFO report for us. Hello, Kevin. Welcome to the program. Go ahead, Kev.
Hi, George.
Go ahead, sir.
I had to change the opening a couple of times just today. Kirsten Gillibrand, in a speech in Glen Falls, did mention UFOs. The crowd reaction floated somewhere around derision. There was laughter when she moved to the subject of UFOs. The worst part of this was that she suggested that Congress might never get the truth about the special access programs known as SAP, although David Grush, had said he knows the names of those involved in the creation of some of those programs and that he has names of first-hand witnesses, we still haven't heard much about it. It does seem that the plan is to drag this out until the public tires of it and a new administration can kill it. Confirmation of this came earlier today when Chris Mellon said that he thought there was little prospect of further hearings about UFOs by the House Oversight Committee, though there is still legislation that provides the precedents for declassifying UFO information. However, Mike Turner, who chairs the Permanent Select Committee, has convinced James Comer, who is the chair of the House Oversight Committee, that additional hearings could harm the reputation of the DOD and further hearings should be avoided. Further, Turner disregards Grush's testimony, though there are members of the committee who do take it seriously. I wonder if they had the classified briefings in which Grush named the names, and if so, that testimony wasn't overly persuasive. I suppose that I should note that some of Turner's campaign donors are large defense and aerospace organizations. But there is some good news. Stan Gordon, who began researching UFOs in the 1960s and is the force behind the research in the Kecksburg UFO crash of 1965, hosts a website called Stan Gordon's UFO Anomaly Zone, and it covers a range of paranormal phenomena, though my interest is in the UFO sightings. As an example is a sighting reported on August 3rd of this year from downtown section of Latrobe, Pennsylvania. The witness, who was taking an early morning walk when he spotted a series of lights that he first thought was an aircraft. As the lights approached, he saw a solid, dark, triangular-shaped object. He said that the bottom of it had one white, steady light on each corner of the triangle, and in the center there was a steady, single red light. Along the sides were more white, steady lights. He said that the craft was about 100 to 200 feet long from point to point and was flying at about 1,500 feet. The UFO made no noise. For those who often ask why we haven't any good UFO footage, because nearly everyone is carrying a good quality digital camera in a pocket, here's part of the answer. The man took video of the UFO and saw the image on the phone screen. When he got home and tried to review the video, there was no image. He said he didn't know why it didn't record, and he also said he watched the object for about 3 minutes. Stan also reported on what he called the surge of activity over the July 28th to 30th weekend of this year. Some of the reports related to Bigfoot hunting, which I was uninterested in. On July 29th, Gordon got a phone call from a witness who said that he had seen a massive triangular-shaped object that emitted a bright greenish-orange glow. The UFO was hovering when he first saw it. The UFO then vanished only to reappear. There seemed to be an electronic hum coming from it. And here's why this is interesting. The witness took pictures with his cell phone. He could see the UFO on the phone, but the photograph showed only a blurred image. He didn't understand why that happened, but it does suggest there might be some sort of electronic emission invisible to the eye that affects the digital cameras. And before you laugh about that, remember there are hundreds of reports of UFOs stalling cars and affecting other electronic devices. And I'll post a link to Stan's website and additional information on my blog. And that's what we have for tonight, George.
All right, my friend. We'll talk to you next week. Kevin Randall talking about incredible UFO reports, and he is one of the best. In a moment, we're going to talk about the Perennials, the megatrends creating a post-generational society. It is a fascinating discussion. Next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Our special guest for the first couple hours tonight, Mauro Guillen, with us, is the former dean at the Judge Business School at Cambridge University. He's one of the most original thinkers at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, where he is the vice dean of Wharton's MBA program for executives, an expert on global market trends. He is a sought-after speaker and consultant. Mauro combines his training as a sociologist at Yale and as a business economist in his native Spain to identify and quantify the most promising opportunities at the intersection of demographic, economic, and technological developments. His research, teaching, and speaking incorporates both numerical assessments of trends and illuminating examples from business, politics, and everyday life. Mauro, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
The Perennials, interesting book.
Yeah, I believe so. I enjoyed reading it last year.
Tell us why you decided to write it.
Well, I was in the middle of the pandemic, isolated in my home during the confinement, and I was giving some online presentations. And this was a group of directors of zoological gardens, or zoos, and aquariums in the United States and abroad. And we were talking about how they're having a hard time attracting people from different generations, because you see the very young, the grandchildren, and the relatively old, the grandparents, want to go to those kinds of places, but not the people in between. And it dawned on me that we should be thinking not about the differences across generations, but rather how we can bring them together to enjoy the same kinds of things in life. So that's where the idea came from.
And the word perennials, tell us what that means to you.
Well, what that means essentially is perennials is people who don't act and don't think their age. So they feel that they can work or they can learn or they can enjoy life at every age without having to follow the stereotypes and the norms that we've been told about what is age appropriate. So, for example, that you have to do all the learning when you're young and be sure that you've learned everything you would need for the rest of your life, because then you have to devote most of your life to working on some job that it doesn't, make you happy. But knowing that in the end you'll get this prize called retirement. So that compartmentalized way of living our lives is, I think, really at odds with, what's going on in the economy now and with technology, because we need to be so much more flexible, right, and be ready to change and to reinvent ourselves.
Mauro, are you feeling right now that a lot of people who are working are unhappy?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have a lot of evidence on that. So it's not just my feeling or what I hear from my neighbors. It's also that, whenever you check on surveys or studies that have been conducted about people's jobs, most people don't really like their jobs. By the way, they hate the commuting, and they hate the traffic, and they hate the fact that they have to show up 5 days a week and so on and so forth. But more importantly, they don't find it fulfilling. And this is a mistake, right? Because then, of course, what we want is to save money as much as we can so that we can retire as early as possible. And then what happens to most people is that they retire and they realize this is not for me, right?
Exactly.
They feel bored, they feel disconnected. In other words, there's got to be a better way of organizing our lives, of living our lives. And that's what I propose in the book.
And why does it seem like, Mauro, that the longer you work, the longer you seem to live?
Well, because, that keeps us active, both mentally and physically. When you retire, you see most people, most Americans, when they retire, you know what they do with the extra time? They watch TV. They should be listening to the radio, I guess. Maybe that would be more healthy. But they watch TV, and so they become couch potatoes. And that's good for your health, both mental and physical. And you also get disconnected from your networks of contact, your friends, and so on. And that causes isolation, loneliness, which is an epidemic among people above the age of 60 or 70 in this country. So all of those things essentially make us not only unhappy, but also less healthy.
You say in your book, The Perennials, that there are three important aspects that people really should be concerned about. What are these three?
Well, the most important thing, I think, is to essentially anticipate that no matter how hard we try, when we're young, we're not going to be able to learn everything that we will need to know for the rest of our lives, because technology is changing very quickly, and the economy is also changing very quickly. And so we're going to have to reinvent ourselves several times throughout our lifetime. We're not going to be able to just, again, as I said earlier, study when we're young and then work for 30 or 40 years, because whatever it is that we learn is going to become obsolete. It's going to be antiquated very quickly with all of this technological change, especially in a place like this in California, right? All of these great new technologies that are emerging from here are essentially putting people not out of a job, but certainly inviting people to rethink their careers and to do their jobs in a different way, for sure. So that's the first thing that is really, really important. I think the second thing that is absolutely crucial is for people to realize that in the midst of all of these changes, technology, the economy, and so on, the only possible response as individuals that we can articulate is change. In other words, change is the only possible response to change. If we remain still, if we don't change, then we're going to be, essentially out of whack very quickly. And that's not going to be good. So that's the second thing that I emphasize in the book time and again. And the third is that also think about how the system is working now for people who take the wrong turn at the wrong time, or they make a decision that is not the best. For example, people who drop out of high school. Well, it's very difficult for them to recover from that. As you know, people with a college degree, with a high school degree and then a college degree, they command so much higher wages in the market. But hey, for a number of reasons, 20 to 30% of Americans decide to drop out from high school, and only 50% complete college. Think about teenage mothers, right? So only 2% of them graduate from college, and that's because we don't have a good system in place to help people who, once again, they get unlucky or they take the wrong turn in life to recover from that mistake or to recover from that misfortune. And I could show you, produce more examples of this, but so in other words, the book is not only for people who are already successful to make them even more successful. It's also for people who somehow they fall behind, they make the wrong decision. How can we help them get back on their feet and succeed in life?
And when you look at the baby boomers, the Gen X's, the millennials, the Gen Zers, where do we stand in terms of who's got the greatest potential?
Well, this is, one of the things that I emphasize in the book very much, and you mentioned the subtitle is the post-generational society. I think generations are something that we have invented in our minds. Because, you see, the boundaries between generations are completely arbitrary. So somebody born, let's say, in 1981 and another person born the following year, maybe in different generations, right? But why do you draw the line precisely at that point? So this is a peculiarly American obsession. If you remember, after World War II, we started to compare the greatest generation who went through the Great Depression and fought in World War II with the baby boomers who were born in affluence. And, of course, there were tremendous differences between the greatest generation and the baby boomers. But ever since, we have been essentially inventing new generations, but the differences are not as big. And once again, they're mostly stereotypical, right? And people who belong to some of those generations, they rebel against the labeling and the categorizing. So, for example, I know a lot of millennials who tell me, I don't feel like a millennial. Why do they call me millennial? I'm an individual. I want to exercise my individuality. I have my own values. And you see, I think they're right, because think, for example, a millennial born in the Bronx in New York City and a millennial born in Iowa or in California. Do they have anything in common? Probably not, right? Maybe they have more in common with their parents or with their grandparents than with each other.
The human lifespan was going up, 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 and then COVID hit and it dropped a little bit. Where do we stand right now with that?
Well, I think chances are that we will go back to the long-term trend, which was that life expectancy was going to grow. So we're going to be living, you and I, hopefully, about 6 or 7 years longer than our parents, and possibly up to 10 or 11 years longer than our grandparents. So that's going up. But even more important than that is that now we're staying in good mental and physical shape much longer than in the past. So I don't know whether you remember the mental and physical state of your father when he was 60, let's say, right?
Oh, yeah, I remember it. I remember it. Sure do.
Yeah, but he probably was in much worse shape than you are today or than I am today. I'm nearly 60, right? I remember very well that my father was not in nearly as good physical and mental shape as I am today at the same age. So that's the other big improvement. And what that means is that we can continue to work. Obviously, we can also continue to enjoy life fully for a longer period of time. And that also changes the whole equation. It changes or should change our whole attitude towards life.
And one thing my father did, Mauro, he retired at 60 and really didn't do much after that. And I saw him slowly go downhill after that.
Yeah.
I wish he had kept working. But we're going to take a short break. We'll come back and talk more with you in a moment. Mauro Guillen is with us. His website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. His book we're talking about is called The Perennials, the Megatrends Creating a Post-Generational Society. We will be back in a moment right here on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with Mauro Guillen. We're talking about his latest book called The Perennials. Mauro, I'm concerned about the divide here in the United States. Do you sense it too? The divide between older, younger, political? It just seems like everything's split in half.
Oh, absolutely. This is something that I find very concerning as well, George. And it's something that is happening all over the world, but it's, I think, becoming quite acute here in the United States. Young people feel now that they have to work very hard and pay for the health care and the pensions of another generation. And they also blame that other generation, mostly the baby boomers, for the problem of climate change. So, there's all of this intergenerational, blaming and frictions that I think we need to manage. I think we need to address, because otherwise the cleavage will get deeper and deeper.
Will it solve itself? Or is it going to take a lot of effort on our part?
Well, I think we have to essentially take small steps in the direction of having generations collaborate. And I think what I propose in the book, I think the most effective way is to break down all of those barriers that essentially are telling us, look, you should learn when you're relatively young, then you work, then you retire. Why don't we have people from different generations learning together? Now that we have to engage in lifelong learning, that we have to reinvent ourselves several times, let's have people from different ages learning together. And I think that's going to eventually lead to better understanding among generations.
I had a couple months ago a demographer on the air talking about companies and developing products and how they would market it to certain people. And we were talking about the motorcycles, for example, Harley Davidson normally appeals to older people, and that generation is, dying off or not buying motorcycles anymore. Is that a major problem for up-and-coming corporations to try to pinpoint their market and how to address it?
It is a major problem because brands essentially have been positioning themselves in the market in such a way that they would appeal to certain age groups. And it's not just that people of a certain age eventually will pass away and stop being consumers. It's also that because of population aging, the number of people in the younger age groups is becoming ever smaller, right? So Harley Davidson has a problem, but most of a certain type, most other brands have just the opposite problem, which is that their customer base is aging, and unless they grow with the people above a certain age, they're going to be, losing revenue and market share. So these demographic swings are essentially, creating a completely different situation to which brands were not used to. They need to rethink how they approach the consumer. And my recommendation, what I say in the book, is essentially try to avoid categorizing people into age groups. Try to appeal to everyone. Because once again, as we were discussing earlier before the break, a 60-year-old is considered nowadays to be a relatively young people who still has quite a few years ahead of him or her of an active lifestyle. So I think we have reified, we have exaggerated the differences by age. And because of the increase in life expectancy and the increase in our health span, the number of years in which we remain healthy, those differences are becoming smaller and smaller.
You were talking earlier about retirement. What do you recommend to people who are approaching what is called retirement age? And what is the definition of retirement age, Mauro?
Well, the definition of retirement age varies from country to country. Here in the United States, people on average retire relatively late compared to other countries in the world, so 68, 69 years old. And retirement essentially means that you're no longer actively working and that you have all of the time to yourself. And again, it has many, many negative consequences. So much so that, listen to this, 40% of Americans who go into retirement eventually go back to work, part-time or full-time. 40%.
40%? I did not know that. That's a high statistic.
40%, absolutely. And let me give you another one, which is even more stunning. 52% of people who retire early, so for example at age 60 or 62, 52%, they go back to work either full-time or part-time.
Why do they go back? Are they poor or bored or both?
It's really mostly that they feel lonely, that they get bored, and that they realize that they don't have enough things to do during retirement, and that they want fulfillment, and they want to have friends and to interact with other people. Now, having said that, it is also true that I would say maybe a third of those who go back to work do so for financial considerations, meaning that they didn't set enough money aside.
Do other countries, Mauro, have Social Security like we do here in the United States?
Yeah, most countries in the world, the developed world, that is, so Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and certainly in Japan, South Korea, and other countries in Asia, they have Social Security. So people do get a state pension when they retire. But you know what's happening with state pensions, and the politicians, of course, will never tell you, which is that we don't have enough money to pay for all of those promises that were made. And here in the United States, the best projections by the Social Security Administration itself indicate that in 10 or 12 years from now, we will not have enough money for paying pensions. That is assuming that there's no big wave of young immigrants coming in, which I don't think is going to happen because there's so much of a backlash against immigration. So what I'm trying to say here is that, yes, it's something that is very common around the world, but every single country, because of population aging, is facing the same issue. You have fewer young workers and more people claiming pensions. And it comes to a point that it's unsustainable.
Mauro, try to stay right on your phone. You're coming in clear when you do that, but you're fading when you're off your phone a little bit, okay?
Okay, absolutely.
The closer you are to the phone, the better it is. Well, is there a way out for people? I mean, are we going to make it in the future if this trend keeps up?
Well, I think so, because people are realizing that it's a good idea to continue working past age, 67, 68, as I was saying earlier, that is the average age at which Americans retire. And also, we have all of these new opportunities now for people at that age. See, what people really hate about the jobs is the commuting part. It's not so much the job itself, right? And so with remote work now, with gig work, with all of these new ways of making money, I think there's going to be enormous opportunities for people, let's say, about the age of 60 or 65 or 70, who would like to continue working, but in a different way. So it is actually, I think, very surprising to me that the people who are going to be benefiting from these new technologies is not mostly going to be the 20-year-olds. That was what we thought 10 or 15 years ago. I think it's going to be mostly people about the age of 60.
That's interesting. My mother's 94 years old, Mauro. She's still active. She still drives. She's quick-witted. I don't know what her secret is, but I'm glad I got her genetics because
that's wonderful.
That is wonderful. And Dad made it to 88, and had he not fallen, I think he would have probably gone even further. He would have been 100 years old this year had he made it. And so there's longevity in our family, but the important part is that they're still sharp. They're not, who wants to be old and you can't do anything?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And there are some terrible diseases, as you know, like Alzheimer's, that can make it hellish, not just for the individual, but also for the family members. Fingers crossed, touch wood. We all want to live long lives, but healthy lives.
How did you get involved in the kind of work you're doing right now?
Well, I was in college, and I started working as a research assistant for a professor, and I liked it so much.
You're fading again. You're fading again, by the way.
No, I really like. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes. Whatever you're doing, stay that way.
Yeah. So I was working, as I said, as a research assistant for a professor during my sophomore year in college. And I realized this is the kind of job that I would like to do for the rest of my life, because being a researcher essentially means, well, you ask yourself an important question, and then you go out and you try to find answers to that important question. And I became a professor. I've been a professor ever since.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. We're talking about longevity. What do you recommend for people as they get older, health-wise?
Well, try to maintain an active, from a physical point of view, an active lifestyle. Don't take the elevator. If it's only 3 or 4 flights of stairs, climb the stairs. Take the bus, but, don't take the car maybe, because taking the bus always involves some walking. And, get off the bus like a couple of stops before your home so that you can walk the last couple of blocks. So just look for opportunities to exercise, right? And then secondly, remain engaged and mentally active. So watching TV is one of the worst things you can do. Listen to the radio, right?
That's right. I agree.
So yeah, but TV is bad because there is this assumption that we have built into our minds that you also have to be watching it, so we don't move around. And the words, the language that we're hearing is only partially describing what's going on because we're also looking at some images, right? The radio is completely different. The radio really exercises your entire brain because there's no video. It's only the words. And you very well know as a radio host that you have to convey in all of its complexity what you're talking about with words, with no images whatsoever, right? So that forces the mind to exercise much more as a listener. And so I recommend that people listen to the radio rather than watch TV.
Artificial intelligence. People are concerned that it's going to eat away at jobs, and it just very well could be. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think I am, like everyone else, stunned at what artificial intelligence can do for us. I'm sure, many of your listeners have played around with ChatGPT and other similar applications. It's just amazing what they can do. So I think that in these early stages, the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to change the way in which we do our jobs rather than destroy our jobs altogether. So in other words, we're going to be using ChatGPT. We're going to be using all of these tools to be more productive, perhaps even more creative at work. I'm using it for my job as a professor. So I haven't been fired as a professor, but this technology has already changed the way in which I perform my duties as a professor, as a researcher, as a teacher in the classroom. And I think that's what people should be keeping in mind, that this is yet another tool, like let's say a pocket calculator or an Excel spreadsheet or a computer, and that we need to learn how to use it and do so with a view to increasing our productivity or our creativity at work.
Mauro, if you were a CEO of a company that was manufacturing just products in general, how would your approach be today to what it might have been 20 years ago? Would it be different?
Well, you mean the manufacturing process of that product?
The manufacturing, the marketing, the demographics?
Oh, no, it would be completely different, but not just different from what was going on 20 years ago, different from what was going on before the pandemic. I think the pandemic has been the watershed, right?
Wow.
There's a before and an after. Well, because we were forced to use technology to such an extent during the pandemic that we discovered so many more applications of it that we didn't, exploit before the pandemic. And so manufacturing products, marketing those products, managing customer service relations, and so on and so forth. All of these things at companies have been thoroughly transformed over the last 3 or 4 years. It's a completely different world out there.
China has a huge demographic problem based on their controlling their population and what they put into place. Now they find themselves in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because everything is extreme in China, right? And everything happens very, very fast. Whatever took 50 years in the U.S. to happen, in China happened over 5 or 10 years. But yes, they completely overdid it in terms of limiting the number of children that families could have. And they realized it too late, just 6 or 7 years ago, which is when they abolished the infamous one-child policy. And today, as you know, there's no restrictions on how many babies a family in China can have. But you know what, George? The number of babies is not growing in China. Why? Because try to explain to, let's say, a professional woman in Shanghai that now there is no restrictions as to the number of babies. You know what she's going to tell you?
Yeah, she doesn't want a baby.
Yes, she wants to have a career.
And who could blame her?
Well, absolutely. So sometimes government officials believe that because they say something, then everybody's going to fall in line and do it. And that doesn't even happen in a dictatorship like China, right? I mean, women in particular, right, but young couples in general, they don't want to have 3 or 4 children. They want to have maybe 1 at most. But you know what, George? Here in the United States, we've also had a one-child policy. You know what it was?
What is that?
Oh, yes, very effective, which was allowing women or encouraging women to attend college. So, on average...
That was a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely, for many reasons. It has made the country richer. But the average number of children for American women with a college education is exactly 1. Now, the average number of children for American women without high school diploma is like 3.
Wow,
so it correlates with education very, very clearly. And so America's one-child policy has been to encourage and to facilitate access to college by women.
Interesting take on all that. We're going to take a short break. We're coming up to the top of the hour, Mauro, but what we will do next hour is take phone calls from our incredible audience for you. So they'll call you and we'll put them on and they'll ask you a question as you and I continue chatting as well. The name of the book is called The Perennials, The Megatrends Creating a Post-Generational Society. His websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com. And we will be back in just a moment to take your calls. The lines are now open. Tom's ready to grab you and put you on, so we will be right back.